Hi, and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 103. And today I have a special guest, Corticols, and we're going to revisit our LCI set review and discuss the grades we made and maybe focus on cards that we missed a bit. Cards that we got spot on are not that interesting because we got them spot on. We're going to try talk about what we misunderstood from the format before it was released. Before we go into that, I would like to thank my patrons, and I would like to thank mtgazone.com for sponsoring me. I'm not going to go too deep in that because we want to focus on the guest, and we have a great guest. I asked him if he wants me to tell something about him. He sent me 15 slides, so let's start with that.
I said none.
That's true. But Corticols is a streamer extraordinaire. Streamer that I spent the most time in the chat of, mainly hurling abuse at him while he innocently tries to ignore it to a certain extent. He's also got an amazing podcast, Limited Level Ups, highly recommended for all of them. I will put everything in the description so you will be able to, if you don't know Corticols, you will be able to get acquainted and hopefully stay in his community because it's a great one. Okay. He's also doing coaching. He is a limited guru, and I know that you're too modest to push a plug, but I know that you're going to be expanding your YouTube activity in the upcoming year. So I'm going to shamelessly plug it for you. There's going to be, I think, at least like 3 videos a week with different themes on different days that will give like top 10 cards of a particular category, maybe some advice on the gameplay, maybe some analysis of the current format. So that's going to, I'm looking forward to that. And Alex, as he is also known, is a good person. And I think that counts. That counts in the community of Magic the Gathering. It's nice to surround yourself with nice people. And by threatening them and blackmailing them, I managed to do so. Therefore, Alex is here.
Well, I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. And this is a good trade-off, right? Like, I come on, we talk, and you plug for me because I don't plug myself very often. So we got a nice little synthesis going on here.
There you go. In biology, we call it symbiosis.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
It rarely appears, but sometimes it does happen. Okay, so I told you that we're going to look at our set review, but we did this set review very differently from the regular set reviews. You did your own that you actually broadcast together with Mark, aka MTG Neo.
Yep.
But this set review, we never shared it. We just did it before the set was released. I sent an Excel sheet to Alex, fill in the grades. I filled in my grades, and then we just froze it for the duration of the format. And then right now we're going to reanalyze how we did. But in order to reanalyze something, we need to set some kind of ground rules for how the set is going to be evaluated. And my grades are based on previous sets, game and hand win rate from 17 lands, because I wouldn't be myself if I didn't use 17 lands data also in the set review. This is one of the big problems of the data-driven content creators. In the first days of the format, I don't have that much to do because there is just no data. But later in the format, there is. And I used all the sets since Midnight Hunt to basically try to figure out a universal game and hand win rate. And that has some problems. And one of those problems is that different sets have different win rates. So I need to sort of normalize them. Normalization, it means that I artificially, by doing a couple of basic equations, I change the average win rate of each of those sets to 50%. And therefore, if you have like a set that has a 52% average win rate, and these are the distribution of the games, particular cards, here is your middle 52. And I have a set with 58% average win rate, which is a big discrepancy. The really good cards from the 52% win rate set are going to be just in the middle of the 58% win rate set. And of course, the busted cards from the 58% win rate set are going to be better than anything in the 52% win rate set. And differences are not that big in real life, but there can be big because there can be like 54 versus 57, for example. And that's already creates this kind of disproportion. If I didn't do that adjustment, I would basically end up with all the cards from one set being better and all the cards from the other set being worse, and it would be hard to compare.
Yeah, so, I think just quickly to interject there as a good example, Konzatark here, which we had just online recently, that had a pretty low average win rate, and people were like, "Oh, these cards are so much worse than we thought they were." It's like, no, it's just that the win rate on average is lower than a general, like a standard legal set. So you're gonna get a little bit of weirdness in there.
Yeah, that's probably some good hypothesis there, because what is it? Is it that the boomers came into Arena, they don't have 17 lands and they are winning a lot because that's a boomer set? It's one of the explanations, or maybe particular group of 17 lens users was drawn to Tarkir, and these were maybe the ones with the lower win rate on average.
Yeah.
Whatever the reason, someone else was winning those games, so average win rate on Arena is always 50%. Let's not forget about it. It's always going to be, in a perfect world, if everyone, as they should, would use 17 lands, we would have the 50% average, and I wouldn't have to do those shenanigans with normalization. But we do. So basically what happens is, mathematically, I'm dragging both of those curves so that they are having a peak here instead of where they have on this graph. And that's what I'm doing with the normalization, right? So the grades are slightly different than the win rate you're used to. So A+, these are the busted bombs. These will have the win rate of over 60%. Now, on 17 lands, those cards will have 65, 66, 70% win rates. But because of the normalization, I'm dragging them slightly lower. So everything over 60% is going to be A+. And examples from WoW is Graph Triplets. And spoiler alert, from this set, Bonehorde Dracosaur was an A+. It's actually the most busted card since Midnight Hunt was released. It has the highest normalized win rate of all the cards that we analyzed in that period.
Nice.
And then A's are win rates between 57 and 60%. Example, Red Cap Gutter Dweller, strong card if you remember, or Sanguine Evangelist from the last set, really powerful aggro tool. Then you have A minuses, that's like 55 to 57. And here we already start seeing some uncommons, but like the uncommons at A minus. Actually, a couple of commons made it to A minus, namely Preening Champion and Inspiring Overseer are the only two commons that made it into the A grade in my scale. But here we have Zoetic Glyph, Immodane's Recruiter. You remember those cards because you had it played against you once and you remember it forever. B pluses are between 53.5 and 55. Tough Cookie is an example of a strong, cheap uncommon with powerful ability, but also a card like Scalp Spore Nexus that costs 8 mana, but is very powerful, but is situational. It will not win as much as the Dracosaur because it's not as universally powerful, but it will take over some games. It will be in this B plus range. B's, 52.5 to 53.5. Regal Bunnycorn is an example from WoW. Chupacabra Echo is an example from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Then B minuses will be 51.5 to 52.5. Hatching Plants, Oaken Siren being examples of cards like that. So like solid cards, you want them in your deck. You'll never cut them. They will be good in most of your decks. They will sometimes gain from synergies, like those two cards definitely did in their respective formats. C pluses are like solid playables. Again, never cut, but not something that you will be first picking. Hamlet Glutton and Cavern Stomper are examples I picked because they are playing a similar role in their respective formats, like this big top end for the green decks that green was not particularly strong in either of the formats, but those cards were standing out in both of those. Then you have C's, and these can be very different cards. These are around 50% win rate, like between 49.25, very specific number, and 50.5. And I will come in a second why those numbers are so weird. The Johann Apprentice Sorcerer is one of those. So it's a powerful card, but maybe not in the most powerful color combination. And Plundering Pirate, not so powerful card, but in pretty powerful color, also made that C grade. And these are also things that you're quite happy to play, actually. C minuses are already cards that are not as desirable, between 48 and 49.25. Candy Trail was an example from WoW, sort of like filler card that you put sometimes in your decks when you have some synergies with it. And Echo of Dusk, which is not a bad card, but it was just in a poor color, and therefore it was relegated to the C minus because the color was at a lower win rate. Then D pluses are the sort of like reluctant playables. Stingblade Assassin, Envoy of Okinek Ahau, 46.75 to 48% win rate. Then we go to D's. And I picked this card because it almost always is a D. The green destroy artifact or enchantment, or maybe something else card. 45 to 46.75 kind of win rate. D minuses, you probably don't want to play them. You hope not to play them unless they do like really something special and you have a plan for them. Plunge into Winter or Vito's Inquisitor are the two examples, between 42 and 45% win rate. And Fs are the cards that you probably should never play. Great examples here, As Foretold and the Millennium Calendar. These are the ones that were having a win rate of below 42%. Something that Alex maybe did not get, just how bad those cards must be to get an F in my grade scale. We'll see that in a second.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Don't worry. You shouldn't be stressed about the result.
No. I'm not stressed. I'm excited. I'm excited to see how how I've been able to integrate into your system, and hopefully that's the only little hiccup. We'll see.
Yeah. So generally, the distribution of the win rates that I picked in making this kind of a graph with a long tail on this side. So those very few A pluses, like 0.5% of cards, like 1 in 200 cards is going to be an A plus.
Mm-hmm.
The 2% A's and their 3% A minuses. So just like 5% of the cards are A's, and usually there are rares, so you will not see many of those in your draft. Then you will have roughly, 17% of the cards will be B's. Again, more B minuses than B pluses. That's why those brackets are designed to sort of increase. And this has been done like many sets ago, and it still keeps the sort of correct structure of how they are distributed. Then you have like bulk of the cards will be C's and D's. So there's going to be roughly 40% of the C's and roughly 30% of D's. And then few F's, because I think that, it has to be special to get a proper F grade. And just a quick look how the distribution of those grades look differently in LCI versus all the sets. And one thing that was specific is that this set was quite poor on cards that are B or higher in my grade. It was one of the sets with the fewest B's and A's ever. Although it had quite a large number of A pluses for the reason of certain god, certain dinosaur. And what was the third one? There was the third one. I think Huatli was the third one.
I see the green. Yeah. That card's good.
But especially on this B minus level, there was not many of those cards, and that's very, very particular for the set. And there were a bunch of C's and C pluses, more than in normal sets. So it was the kind of a set with medium quality cards being abundant, but exceptional cards being slightly rarer.
And just actually, was Polani's Hatcher that A? Do you think is that
maybe it was a Palani Hatcher?
Yeah.
It probably was. It probably was. Yeah, Huatli was probably just below Palani Hatcher.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like the difference between A and A plus is minor. You'll never have a choice between two of those cards unless draft boosters are going to change it dramatically when you will have to choose between A and A plus. Few Fs. That's an interesting side effect of the set. There were a few Fs. So just to give you the historical background on how different the set was, 50% of the B minus grade or higher cards were rares, and then add 15% of the mythics. So around 2/3 of the A's and B's were rares and mythics. And that's very different from some other sets. Like in DMU, it was 50%. In Lord of the Rings, it was particularly low. It was only 40% of the B minus and higher cards were rares and mythics. The only set that was similar was Mum, but you have to keep in mind that Mum had many more rares than this set, because it had the special bonus sheet that was actually good. And it was 1.5 rares per pack also in that set. So that's understandable. Here, without having the same thing, only like 1/3 of the cards that were B or higher were at common and uncommon level, which means you really had to open this kind of power early in the packs to get into good decks. And that was, I think, something frustrating, particularly for me. I had like a stretch of drafts when I just didn't see a single like a bomb level card in any stage of the draft. until like pack 3 when I'm deep into green black and I open like Dracosaur because why not at that moment?
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, does this surprise you in any way, or does it confirm your observations?
Yeah, one thing that I think is actually kind of interesting here is the LTR one. Just looking at this, the full spread. Number one, just looking at LCI quickly, I think this makes sense. There's a lot of like good, but not like incredibly busted rares. So like just having this be LCI having the most good rares there, that makes sense. But LTR having more uncommons that are really good compared to other sets. I think that makes sense because when I've just heard the opinion of people, the community and what sets they've liked throughout the year, the trend I've seen is that the experienced players who've been playing a long time, they really actually liked LTR. Partially, I think, because the ring mechanic gives you a lot of decisions, but I think a lot of the power being at uncommon is something that experienced players like because they can play those cards a little more often. It's not just like, oh, did I open a good rare? And with the opposite, I think LCI, I've heard a lot of like newer players, and when I say new, I mean the past 3, 4, 5 years they started playing, really like LCI a lot. And I don't know if that's because half the time they get to open a sweet rare, but it might be some sort of correlation there. And especially more my comment is a little bit more on the LTR thing, that I think that good players like it when the uncommon slot has some pretty good stuff there.
I'm actually looking forward to the play boosters and having both worlds. When I open more rares, therefore giving me more chances of opening bombs, while at the same time having hopefully decent power uncommons in the set as well.
Yeah, me too.
So this is a very ugly graph of our predictions and
Nice.
and how the reality looked like. So I think that one thing that sticks out to me is that you gave 33 Fs.
Yeah.
And there were only 4 in the set. So that's the biggest miss that you had.
So I do think I have a comment on that. I think that generally when I grade early on, I think part of this was probably getting used to your scale of what you define as an F. But I tend to group the D's and the D minuses or most of the D minuses in F for my early gradings. Is like, if I'm gonna give some advice to people, the D minus is like, okay, I could see a place for this card, but it shouldn't make your deck. And I usually put that in the F. So I can understand why F might be a little bit overrepresented here, even if I did grade a little bit off your scale in general.
Yeah, and I think that, you can see that in here that you only have 18 D minuses. There were
Right.
26 in the set. So probably, like lots of those Fs were actually D minuses.
Yeah.
And this did not have a bearing on the end result of the predictions that much. I mean, this graph is messy just to show people how those things were. I think that main thing that I wanted to show, and this is mainly for you if we're going to do that again, is that I'm going to introduce an automatically self-making graph into the Excel sheet that I'm sending you next time that will show you what your grades and how they're distributed, so you can adjust them ever so slightly to keep it within the distribution.
Yeah, sounds good.
Because instead of having this, I mean, you see, I'm a shrewd person. I designed this scheme, so my graph looks exactly like it should, with some variants. But yours is sort of like up and down, up and down, up and down, because you were not sure about how the grade scale works. And actually, probably my biggest misses came from the fact that I put it as I did for all the other sets, while this set had a much more flat distribution of those Bs and B minuses. Like you can see that we both put like around 30 Bs and there were only 15, and I put 33 B minuses and there were only 14 of those. So that was my biggest miss, I guess. You were definitely not a fan of C minus grade.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one that it's probably, I think, and this graph is sort of reflective of that. I think when I'm grading, I often have the toughest time figuring out the C to C plus, because those are always like, well, I can identify general power level, but I think often when a card is a C or a C plus or a C minus, that depends a little more on how the set ends up playing out, a little more context based. So like, I'm not surprised to see that I got, in the middle here, most of them or the most wrong compared to like, I grade the higher grades quite well, but the middle, that makes sense to me too, just like the way I tend to grade.
And, I mean, when we will look at the data, you will realize very quickly that you probably gave fewer C minuses, but all the C minuses that were in the set are either C's or D pluses in your grade, which doesn't make a big miss in the end. So that's fine. You didn't put like something that was an B plus as a C, as a C. That those mistakes happen very rarely. Just to give you historical background, also, just to make you feel better about yourself, these are some results that we had with me and Neil. From LTR, we got like only around 45 cards completely correctly, and around 55 of them missing by 1 grade. And you will see this is not the case in LCI.
Okay.
When we did it in WoW, we learned a bit, and we got 62 correct, and over 100 of them were within 1 grade.
Nice.
So that's improvement. You never did it. You never did it before. 70 cards spot on, and 114 of them within 1 grade of each other.
Nice.
This graph basically shows us that you did a better job in evaluation, which was absolutely not surprising to me, as I always said you were one of the better evaluators in the game. Difference is actually not terribly big, so that makes me super happy. But you got 5 of more completely correct. You got 8 of them more than me within 1 grade. I had more of those 2 grade misses. Luckily, you are the only one that missed the card by 8.
I wonder. I think I actually have a hint of.
Don't worry, you will learn on the next slide.
Okay,
I think.
Great.
Because what I'm going to start with is cards that Alex got terribly wrong.
Yes.
Because I want to make myself feel good, at least for the beginning, and then we can go with the PNs about how well you predicted everything. But yes, there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
The card that we missed by 6 or more grades, and you gave it an F, I gave it a C minus. And want to guess what the final grade was?
I think it ended up, if I were to grade it, I think it would end up like normalized. I think C.
It's a B.
Wow. Okay. Even better than I thought. Excellent. Okay,
it actually turned out to be a solid card. Sometimes you will lose with it in your hand, but so many games you just like, your plan is to get to 8 mana, and when you get to 8 mana, you win.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
You cycle a couple of dinosaurs, your plan is going perfectly well. So Bringer turned out to be, the HEB ability is just very good, and that's it.
Yeah, so, and I can tell you a little bit about why I graded it this way. So I remember very distinctly, actually. So when I did my set review with Mark Anderson, for those who don't know, he's a ex-Canadian pro. Me and him do the set reviews together, and I like to entertain the possibility of cards a little more than my set review partners in general. I've at Ethan Lord Tupper in the past, and I think that in my brain I was like, you know what, I can see something here. Mark actually was like, so this is just an F, right? And then I went, you know what, it probably is closer to an F than not. Maybe there's something here, but I think it's probably going to land closer to an F. So I underestimated how often you could do the thing, because obviously I think anybody can read this is a very powerful effect, but the frequency that actually you get to do it and bring back a bunch of things, I underestimated that a little bit, or maybe a lot, clearly.
Yeah, I think that generally this is my biggest gripe with your set reviews, that sometimes you just agree too much with the person, and I can see that you sort of want to say something, a hot take. Some might even say hot take, and you just withhold it. And I said, no, we want Alex's hot takes, even if they're going to be wrong. It's good to have diversity rather than bandwagoning, because it would be interesting to compare if people that review the sets together make the similar mistakes in the same direction, because they tend to agree with each other rather than be confrontational. Does not apply to Lola, who will just say whatever he pleases.
Yeah, Lola's not influenced at all.
This is some card that you missed by 6 grades, but I think that it's because you mixed the cards up.
Oh, probably. Yeah, I think
that you thought that you're grading the red one that gives +1/+0 and haste. That's my guess, because I don't see you mismarking this card. I think that you would have given it at least a C+.
Yes. I would have underrated it too. I actually thought this card was worse than it ended up being. But yes, you smart, Sirgovitz, insightful and smart as always. You nailed it. I graded this an F because I thought this was the dowsing dagger.
Yeah, because I always mix those cards in my head as well, because somehow dagger, needle, dowsing, lodestone, whatever. Yeah, same thing. It was a B- in the end. So you missed it by 7 grades or 6 grades. But yeah, let's not count this one, because that was just a clerical error.
I didn't check my work. Yeah.
This one you did miss by 6 or more grades.
Yep.
The ancient one. Another card that looks weird, but actually worked.
Yeah, this is a card that I think I I remember this is one of the cards I thought about the longest. Like during the set review, after the set review, just trying to figure out like the play patterns. Like, are you going to be milling them? Are you milling yourself a little more often? And when it came down to it, I kind of just thought, all right, like there's some good stuff going on here, but it's just Descend. Like, I think I would have graded this card a lot higher if it was Descend 4, because having a 0/0 on the battlefield for as long as it takes to get to Descend 8, that's a lot of time, right? But
That is 0/0. It's an enchantment that
yes,
lets
enchantment.
you loot for 4
Yes.
mana and mill.
And I think that was like the crux of like, okay, well, how good is that? And it turned out that, well, I think the thing that didn't clue in for me is like, well, Descend 8 is a lot, but if you activate that ability once, you get pretty darn close to Descend 8 after, considering the other things you've been doing in the game. So that was my big miss here.
Land Cyclers were a big friend of that card.
Yeah,
because
totally.
you mill yourself for 6, you discard Land Cycler, that's already 7 cards in the graveyard.
Yep.
It ended up being C+.
Okay.
Nailed it.
Nice. Yeah, great job. You got it.
I mean, I assume that it's going to be an F some amount of times and an A some amount of times. Let's go for C+. Okay, and that's it. That's all the misses of 6 grades or more that you did in the whole set. We're going to look at some more granular misses later at the end of the stream. But let's now focus on my terrible misses. And my first one is the Throne of the Grim Captain. I gave it an F. You gave it a D+, which is not that much better, but better. And it turned out to be a B-.
Good, yeah.
So quite a large miss there for me. I just didn't see that it's going to be capable of coming together. I missed that. There are some black pirates, for example. I underestimated the land cycling dinosaurs. I underestimated. I think that the ability of just tap mill 2 cards is just going to be good in some decks on its own. And then when someone attacked me with it and then reanimated the +2/+0 indestructible dinosaur, I realized, okay, that's how it works.
Yeah. I feel pretty similar about that. I exactly the same as you. I underestimated how good the dinos were. Just the fact that there was 5 colors of cycling dinosaurs really make sure your dinosaur slot is almost the free bingo space. It doesn't really matter what colors you have. Because I was thinking, okay, maybe there is a color pair that best uses Throne, because green-black, for example, gets access to all of these creature types. And I think there's one more in there too, one other color pair. But it really wasn't that hard to have the dinosaur, which, like I said, that's kind of the free bingo space. Merfolk, that was one of the ones that, like, you could have some really good merfolk, like Cenote Scout, but that one was kind of hard to get in there if you didn't pick up some good ones. Pirate really wasn't that hard, and Vampire ended up not being that difficult either. So yeah, I think I just, the other thing too, I probably overestimated how many you needed of each one, because I think ideally, and maybe you might have a better sense of this, but I think you need like one, if you really like, one vampire in your deck would be fine, because the thing is, like, if you have one of these creature types, like there's only, let's just take vampire, and you only have one of them, well, yes, it's not that likely you're going to hit it by after you've seen 20 cards in your deck, but if you just like mill, you're seeing 3 cards per turn, right? So unless you're unlucky and that one vampire is the bottom of your deck, you can probably win in 3 turns with a 7/7 attacking you each turn. So I underestimated how, or overestimated how many of each creature type you needed as well.
Yeah, so I never dived into that analysis, but someone on my Discord actually did.
Oh, nice.
And they posted a document there with some analysis. I don't think that there is exactly the maybe they updated it now. It's not someone, actually. Someone has a name. It's Vengers11 on my Discord did the analysis of different aspects of Throne of the Grim Captain and when is it good and when is it not. So maybe one of the good reasons to join. Shameless plug there. I also overestimated Treasure Map, and I this is a constructed bias, because I never played with this card in Limited. I knew that it was okay in Constructed, so I assumed that if they reprinted it, it must be pretty at least decent in Draft, and it's not. So
yeah, I overrated it too. To be fair, like, it's a C+, and I think if I'm to guess, it's probably closer to like a D+ or something like that. And exactly, I think it was just a grade D. It's a card that not only I think in Constructed gets a little bit better because you can really bank on having something big to do with the mana after you flip it. Because in Constructed, sometimes it's a grindy card, but sometimes it's an explosive card where you go off the treasures. But also, I think it turns out that last time this was printed was now 8 years ago or something. So Magic has just kind of moved past this style of gameplay, the slow incremental stuff, a little bit in the past little while.
Yeah, I think that this is the millennial Magic, basically.
Yeah. Millennium Magic. That's good. I actually haven't heard that before.
Well, we have to start doing it, no?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so this is the trickier part because there are two different metrics that I'm using for how wrong we were on different sets, and this is the absolute performance in Lord of the Rings. This means that I look at every single card and I see by how many great progressions we missed independently of the direction. So if I overvalued the card by 1, if I gave it a C plus and it was a C, it's 1. If I undervalued it by 1, if I gave it a C minus and it was a C, if I gave it a C and it was a C minus, it's also 1. So this is like the absolute mistake that was made. And this is from LTR. We both had around 2 great misses for on average per common, 2.5 for an uncommon, and like 2.8 for rare or mythic. And it's going to be pretty normal that the misses on rares and mythics are going to be bigger because they have a larger range of values. It's like all the commons are going to be in that, D minus to B minus range, while rares are going to be F to A plus. So it's easier to make bigger misses in there. We moved to WoW and we did better. So nice. It was 1.2 on average per common that we missed, around 1.5 per uncommon, and around 2 for rare mythic. Me and Neil, not Alex. And this is the LCI. Similar levels on commons, around 1.2. 1.5 for uncommon, this is the same, and much smaller misses by rares. And nice. Again, Alex is doing better in those high rarities by a bit. So around 0.15 better on the uncommons and like 0.1 per rares and mythics. But then, of course, the absolute miss does not tell you anything about the tendencies that you have. For that, I'd calculate the same thing, but then if you overvalued, you get a +1. If you undervalued, you get a -1. Okay. So if you overvalue one card and undervalue the other card, they zero each other out, basically.
Nice. Okay, I see.
And then in LTR, me and Neil, we had then much lower error. So of 0.7, much lower error on the uncommons and much lower error on the rares, around 2. Then we did much better, like almost bang on commons. Only one great mistake by uncommons and like 1.2 by rares and mythics. And here we have a difference already about how Alex grades cards.
Whoa.
So you actually undervalued every single category. Nice. And we never undervalued a single one of them in any of the previous sets. So you are the pessimist, turns out.
Which is weird because I see myself as an optimist grader a lot of the time. No. It's
this is optimism.
Yeah,
this is optimism.
Yeah, man. That uncommon slot is really funny. So it's funny because I do think I see myself as an optimistic grader. Again, like I mentioned before, but when it comes to those like not so great cards, I tend to bias lower rather than higher because I think it's more of a mistake to play a bad card too often than it is to play a good card not often enough. I think the bad cards hurt you more than the good cards help you in a lot of spots. That's my little, just seeing this data explanation of it. That might not be exactly true, but I think that might be why.
So you basically, you care about your audience so much that you want to protect them.
Yes. No, it's true. It's true.
Your didactic skills require you to give them a realistic overview and protect them from playing those bad cards. And that's a very good observation. I think that this is an analysis that is waiting to be made. The number of cards, in particular win rate brackets, how many of them are there in the deck, and how does it contribute to the outcomes of the deck? Because I think that your theory that if you play like 5-6 mediocre cards in your deck, you're going to have so much lower win rate because sometimes you will just draw 4 of them in a game and it's going to turn into a non game. It's one of the most acute observations and my personal level up when I try to make sure that I never am in a situation that I have to put any of those cards is improving my game by quite a lot. And that came from your podcast, actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah, like, my mantra is just like, I say it all the time, but just play the good cards, and it gets you a lot of the way there in limited.
So yeah, basically what I failed in is uncommons. I missed them by a whole grade on average, and I overrated them systematically. While I did decent with commons and rares and mythic, even compared with you. Okay, and then this is another one because obviously some of those mistakes will be because you overvalue a certain color. And this is the analysis from LTR. When me and Neil, we definitely overvalued white, we definitely overvalued green, and this is a general trend that we had, overvaluing the multicolor cards because they are the signposts, so you tend to give them generous grades because that's what you're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
Turns out these are the easiest ones to miss. So there you go. We nailed red. We knew that it's powerful, and we actually were maybe a bit too sheepish on black in LTR.
Me too.
But yeah, the biggest misses came exclusively from this white and green kind of, trying to hope that they're going to describe that Scry deck is going to be a thing or something.
Well, also white and green particularly, I think there was a lot of food, not to go deep on LTR, Lord of the Rings, but there was a lot of food cards that missed the food archetype, just like wasn't very good in general. So there might have been some cards in there that might have been overrated because of that.
Yeah, Rosy Cotton. I remember. Then when we did WoW, we overestimated across board, but we mainly missed white. We were too bullish on white. Red, again, nailed it. Turns out, just give good grades and it will be the red.
Yep.
That's the easy one. Multicolor, again, missed by not by as much. And those misses were much lower than the previous one. Like we didn't miss by 3 grades on average, like green in Lord of the Rings. Here again,
love it.
You undervalued every single color. You only overvalued the signposts.
Yeah.
Or the multicolor cards. Nailed red.
Nice.
I was a bit optimistic on the red. Nailed black. I was overly optimistic on the black. I nailed blue. You were a bit too conservative on the blue. We made opposite mistakes on white. You were a bit cautious. I was a bit optimistic. And we both underestimated green. I did it slightly less. And here is another thing that maybe comes from the data. When I was evaluating green, I assumed that green will be mostly played in dinosaurs, and it's going to be a disproportional sample. That's why I gave it sort of optimistic, because I thought dinosaurs look good.
Yeah.
And you probably look at each color pair as a sort of equal thing, but the samples are not going to be equal because people will tend to play some decks more than the others.
Yeah, and I think that for green in particular, and I don't know if this is going to be, if you looked at all of my sets, if we did this analysis for how I rated for the past, 2 years or something like that, I'd actually bet that green is the color I most underrate. And I have a bias against it for sure, but it's not necessarily an unfounded bias. I think it's that generally green, they tend not to push the green cards, the green commons as much. I've talked about this before, but they are very resistant to making like Sir Elf's Packmate style cards, generally in green. I think that's the last great example of enter the battlefield, draw a card. And I think green,
Jewel Thief was good.
Jewel Thief, true. Jewel Thief 2. Yeah, that's another good example.
Contagious Vorak.
Yeah, so you're right. The last one is not accurate. There's been a few in there, but those.
Yeah, but no, these are exceptional cards because I know I know the analysis. I know what the top green commons of the last 2 years are exactly. Sarov Packmate is beyond that data set. Right. So I know that these two were just massive outliers in terms of green quality, and these are the only 2 cards in that period.
Yeah, so
the rest of the green commons were lagging behind every single color for a long time.
That generally is what happens, and so when green, doesn't have like a great synergy going on, and its cards are just kind of like vanilla looking, which they kind of were for this set too. I do think I underrate it, preemptively, right? I don't know if I'm going to stop underrating it until maybe design principles change. Maybe I should, because clearly it's a trend. But yeah, I think that's why you see that here.
I also think that green, and that might be your personal bias. I think that green is a intermediate player color. The cards are relatively powerful on face value, but you cannot squeeze too much out of them beyond that. While blue cards will be decent power level, but if you play them well, they're going to be more than the sum of their parts.
Yeah.
And in data, there will be plenty of intermediate players who will be boosting green because they have much better result compared to playing white or blue or black versus the top players. So these are the cards that are flattening the sort of skill level.
Yeah, it's a great observation for sure.
And yeah, multicolors. You were much closer. Let's put it like that. I was a bit too optimistic. Akawali, damn you.
Yeah, fair.
All right. So basically, this is the analysis of the misses. Any particular observations that from your experience of playing this format?
No, I think so. Like the biggest observation I have would be, yeah, like the green. We just talked about that. That makes sense. I'm actually a little bit surprised I underrated blue as much as I did here. Almost, kind of approaching green because I like the blue cards a lot going in. Maybe I just didn't give them like in my brain. I thought they were better than the grade that I gave them. I'm not exactly sure, if there's a systematic thing going on there. But I guess overall, I'm just surprised I got the other colors pretty darn close, which is nice.
I might actually look at your blue cards evaluation and see if there's any trend in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Sword.
Or maybe the artifact cards. Like I know for sure, like the Siren, I underrated a little bit going in the Oaken Siren.
Let's see, blue. Oh wait, I need to do this, and then the second sorting will be error chord,
It's
largest to smallest.
a good input.
Blue. So I think that you what basically happened is that you didn't overvalue any of the blue cards,
Okay.
and that maybe was like accruing the. So the only card that you let me take a look. No, it's just a bunch of it's just a disproportion between the number of cards you undervalued and overvalued. That's basically it.
All right, fair enough. Yeah.
So there's it's just small numbers that accumulate across the time.
Yeah.
And I think that most of the blue cards that were there actually are zeros. So you nailed quite a lot of them.
Cool. No, great. That's cool.
Which is good to know. Okay. Right. My biggest misses. So now we're looking at the broader and in both directions, so we know which direction was the mistake made. My biggest miss was Treasure Map. I overrated it by 6. Bartolomé del Presidio. I was quite high on that card.
Me too.
Because I wanted it to be good.
Yep.
Same with the Sovereign Okineka How. I wanted that card to be good. I gave it a good grade. I drafted it like 3 times, never managed to make it properly work because just it's this classic cards that I know now from any set reviews that I did that always underperform. This sort of A plus B needs to survive 1 turn, but a very powerful version of it. Because in the end, this card needs to stay on the board, survive 1 turn. Then you need to have a second thing that will make it slightly better. And then it will do something that can still be chomped out by a Poison Dart Frog. And this is so annoying that I want this kind of magic to be the magic that is available, but unfortunately, it's not going to be the case. Minecart, that card actually surprised me that it was not so good in this format because technically, like it ticks all the boxes. It's like an artifact; it makes more artifacts, it ramps you. It just never fitted in any of the archetypes somehow. So
yeah, I think I remember most people being very high on that card, myself included, at the beginning of the set because it's kind of like a gold vein pick that doesn't require. I mean, it requires a creature, but doesn't require additional mana. So it seems like it would even be smoother to get the treasure out of it. And I want to shout out Ben from Lords of the Limited, Ben Werney. I think he was the only person I remember during preview season that was like, no, this card doesn't seem that good to me. And he listed a few reasons that actually panned out to be true. So yeah, just it's a card that, and you might see this in card evaluation in general. You'll see cards that are like a variation on a theme, or just like here's a card that's like this card, and it looks similar but a little bit different. Any small changes to a magic card really can have profound effects. Some spots and some changes you make, taking a mana off or adding mana obviously is huge, but even something like a crew cost here and there, like when you're trying to see these two cards together and you go, oh, this is like this, it's probably not as much like this as you might think in a lot of spots. Not only just the card itself, a little tweak can do it, but format context as well.
Yeah. Uh, I mean, okay, we can focus on the rares, but there's no need. But Mischievous Pup was another card that I thought it would be better, but just the 3/1 body was just like nothing.
Yep.
I think that's the main problem. I think Caparocti Sandborn, I was just too high on it. It's still a decent card. It's just like not as good as I was grading it. This one was my big failure because I really was hoping that the Waterlogged Hulk is going to be a good card.
Me too.
If it milled 2, damn it.
Yeah, that'd be very good. Yeah, very strong.
But it milled 1. And then, of course, that led to Ukbenbach being pretty bad. I think Canonized in Blood was an F. I gave it like a C minus. That's I think main mistake. But yeah, I mean, these were the cards that were my biggest misses. Now let's look at your list of big misses in this direction. Much shorter.
Similar though. Similar cards.
Similar though. Yeah, we have the Mine card, we have the Treasure Map, we have Sahili, Mischievous Pup, Bartolome del Presidio. You have Glorifier of Suffering. Another card that, I mean, it looked like it's going to be much better than it was. But then turns out that sacrificing this one thing, there was just not enough sacrifice fodder in this format, I think.
Yeah, that was...
Give a couple of more of things like the Mismatic thing, the draw a card artifact. Like a couple of more of those things, and it might have been something. But so many times I had that card in my hand, and I'm like, okay, so I'm sacrificing a 1/1 to get a +1/+1 counter, or am I sacrificing my something that I can craft later? I'd rather, craft it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the Glorifier really. By the end of the format, I was just telling people like, just don't play this card. Like, if you think you should play this card, just don't play this card. You'd have to show me a very specific deck.
I had a 7/1/1 Vigilance guys deck, and it was good in that.
There we go. Yeah, that's the kind of situation I'd be like, all right, it gets the thumbs up, but that's you don't often get 7 of those. 7 of
that was I had to cut one.
Yeah,
I felt dirty.
Not often
because I also had 2 Ruined Lurker bots in it, so I thought 9/1 drops, even if they're flying, that might be too much. I actually cut it for Glorifier of Suffering, incidentally, because
that's funny.
Make them bigger.
Yeah, but I think you're totally right. You're like, a lot of these cards, they just both you and I overrated, or just misgraded, I should say. They're all kind of similar. Like, there's just a few things here and there, like the treasure map and the mine card, but a lot of them are the sacrifice cards, right? That, like the Glorifier, the Bartolome, and yeah, I think that's kind of an example of. I actually think Bartolome is still a good card. You can put it in a different format where the payoffs for sacrificing are better. It's the reason I was so high on the card, and I think part of the reason probably you were so high on the card is you look at it and it's not like other sacrifice cards, right? It has no sorcery speed restriction. You can do it. It's more than once per turn. It's got all the good hallmarks, but the payoff for sacrificing just wasn't really there.
I was 5/3 Chronic. Yeah, and again, I think that mine card would be a card that can be good in some other format. It just would have to align better. Yep. Glorifier of Suffering could be a banger of a card if the format was slightly different as well. I mean, and Mischievous Pup in some formats would be just a busted card because if you have things to recoup, replay, and the game allows you to play the 3-mana do nothing creature on occasions, it would be much better.
Yeah, let me give you like 2 good examples here. Imagine the pup in a format in Neon Dynasty with Saga, right? Like that would be a banger there, right? Like holy, I think that's a good.
The modern era, boom.
Yeah, modern era. Pick it up, do some more looting. Yeah, that'd be.
Or return a ninjutsu card, because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. You can do so much cool stuff. And minecart maybe even in like if the sacrifice deck is a little bit better and you're just like pumping out a bunch of fodder, that gets. So yeah, just kind of to highlight how context really matters.
And it's so hard to get in the review also because again, you miss on one archetype and you miss out on the review completely in this kind of metric, because this is the problem of my grading system. It has to take into account not only the power of the card, but also the context of the format at the same time while never having the card in your hand, which is I mean, I'm not making it easy for you.
No, this is part of the fun.
Okay, the biggest misses in the other direction. Throne of the Grim Captain, I already did. Deep Cavern Bat, my most beloved card in the format, I actually gave it a way too low grade. I think I gave it like a C, and it was like a B or B plus or something.
Yeah, it was great.
Unstable Glyph Bridge, I gave it slightly lower grade. I gave it a B minus because I thought maybe it's just not good, but it turned out it just busted. It was an A in the end. Tithing Blade, I definitely underestimated how good is this card because, Edict Effect's not famous for being great, but this one was actually just good enough.
Yeah.
And it was something that black decks direly needed to stem the bleeding in the early turns. So it was just 2-drop, very good 2-drop, basically, that later can be something. And I missed on the Bringer by 4 grades, so yeah, I mean, it happens. Now let's see the pessimistic Alex and your misses in this direction. You have more of those. I mean, we decided Lodestone Needle is not a miss in the end, but Throne is there. Terror Tide, so you did a different sweeper that you undervalued.
True, yeah.
Card was still good. This is something that I don't know how you can live with this, but missing on the 1-drop.
Yeah, man, it's my brand. My brand is ruined and tarnished. I missed on a good 1-drop. Yeah, Warden of the Inner Sky. So this card, it's one of those cards I think flew under the radar even in Constructed, which is being played a lot in Constructed in multiple formats these days. It flew under the radar for, when I say fly under the radar, these days, when things fly under the radar, they're only under the radar for like a day or two. It used to be like 2 weeks or something. It's like, oh, somebody figure out this card is good. But Warden is a card that it just didn't look like the kind of card that could take over the game by itself, but it really did, right? You just either in a board stall or just like put all your stuff in one basket and just like ask your opponent to say, hey, do you have an answer to this? And sometimes they had a removal spell. And it's like, okay, you carry on your day. You got some scry in there. But yeah, I think I just undervalued it because even though it's it looked like a set, LCI looked like a set where there's a lot of trinkety stuff lying around you can tap. I think I just overestimated how much, or I misevaluated how much of a cost tapping 3 things is, because that's not that big of a cost in the set. You can tap, your craft card and your 1/1 token and your treasure, and just do that every single turn. So yeah, that definitely, you're right. I'm still reeling from this.
I had one in the pre-release, and I had 2 Spyglass Sirens in my pre-release, and I finished my pre-release. I went to the binder in the LGS and I bought a playset of the Wardens just in case for Constructed. And I played it in Standard. I played it in Pioneer. Definitely a good investment of £3. So
yeah, it's a great call.
Unlucky drop. Shame.
I know. These are the cards I talk up. Unlucky drop is the exact kind of card I go, people tend to underrate it.
You had a recency bias from WoW.
Absolutely. No, I think that's exactly it. I was like, you know what? There's been a few sets here and there where it hasn't been as good. Let's bump it down a little. But, I got to stick to my guns. I know it's a good card. I should, I think the exception to the rule was WoW. Maybe LCR
it was literally the exception to the rule because I did analysis of all those cards that were printed in the last 2 years, and the whatever it was called, even I don't even remember the name because I played it so rarely.
Misleading Moats.
Yeah. I knew that M was there. That was the lowest win rate card in living memory of this type. And it was because just it didn't align with what Blue was doing. Another example of the fact that evaluating a card on the card value is nothing, because if it doesn't align with what the set is doing, it's just going to be rubbish, even though every single other version of that card is going to be decent.
Yep, exactly.
Bat Colony, you were quite low on that, and also Might of the Ancestors, my personal pet card of this format. You were low on it, but you missed. It was better than you thought.
Yeah, both these cards, if I remember correctly, I gave in the F range. And I think Bat Colony, maybe I gave it a low D- or something.
I think you gave it an F.
Okay, gave that one an F too.
Both of those I think were Fs. I wanted Might of the Ancestors to be good. It was not good, but it was definitely playable.
It was playable, yeah. You needed to have enough, like, the 1/1 flyers. Yeah. Exactly, that was kind of the thing. I think when I saw this card, I didn't quite clock just how many cheap flyers there were, or at least I knew there were a lot of cheap flyers, but looking at this card specifically, I just blanked on that, which does push it into playable range. And then Bat Colony, I remember us being very, very low on the cave deck going into the set, and, things have balanced out at this point in the format with the cave deck. You know, you definitely draft it once every few drafts or something. But I remember just thinking, oh, Back Colony, and I still think this is true. Back Colony is the most awkward of the payoffs because you have to spend the actual cave mana and you need white cave mana. But it turns out that when you do the thing, it's very, very good, right? You get 3 bats and then counters after. So yeah, underrated it.
Yeah, I wrote a primer on the cave deck before the set was released, and I specifically told people not to put Bat Colony in those decks because it's just like having the white cave mana is just like realistically not feasible early.
Tough.
And then, yeah, it still was playable in some versions, and I wonder how much of it is Sam Black just pumping the data of the card single-handedly.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to wonder sometimes, right? How much is Sam influencing Black Cave? You know, Black, just straight up Black Cave.
Okay, well, that's the slides for this.
Nice.
Any parting thoughts on the LCI as a format? How did you actually like it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know, something that people ask me a lot on the stream, just like, do you like this format? And you know, I like Magic. That's what I always say. I always like Magic, and my range of enjoyment is often narrow, where it's like, well, if I don't like it very much, I don't hate it. And this is definitely one of the ones that I had kind of a roller coaster with. Funny enough, I started off just like most sets, being like, okay, first 10 drafts, yeah, new format, always gonna like it. And then I dipped a little bit because after, you know, I expected, this is something you've brought up, and I think is very, you know, I brought up referencing you in certain spots, but after 2 weeks, you usually expect a big format shift where the people that generally draft quick draft, they go there, and the people who are diehards of best of 3 or just, you know, best of 1 and 1 and rank up, they stay in Premier or best of 3. And when that happens, you get a big format shift where the quote unquote obvious decks, they become a little bit more drafted because you've got good players in the queue, not the less experienced players who might not know that these are the best decks. And I was expecting that to happen around week 2 or week 3, but it didn't. I found that it took a lot longer for the format to kind of stabilize and come to an equilibrium where I was just drafting Jeskai over and over and over again. And one of the biggest things, as much as I love Magic in all forms, I do value a variety of experiences. So just drafting like the same thing for 3-4 weeks is like, okay, we'll go to Concentric here, come back. And now that I've come back and it has kind of stabilized and equalized, I really like it. I think it's at a really good place. So if I could always, you know, beginning of the format, draft it like we do now, where the black decks are definitely draftable. The cave decks are something you should think about, where you shouldn't have even thought about that week 1, you know? I definitely end up thinking that LCI was not a bad format at all. If I had to give it a grade, I think like a 7 out of 10.
Wow,
what about you?
I had an absolutely polar opposite experience from you.
Oh, wow, okay.
I mean, obviously, I don't draft as much as you do.
Yeah.
I mean, I may have like 30 drafts of LCI under my belt because
still a lot.
there's just you know, not enough time. But for the love of it, I couldn't ever draft Jeskai colors. Just like never was open.
Wow.
Never.
Okay.
I ended up having most of my trophies in Golgari colors, and nice. I really enjoyed that moment when everyone was on Jeskai and I could just get like those late Chupacabras and build those decks. Usually it was like starting to draft dinosaurs, getting some green cards, figuring out that red is hard cut and I cannot do anything about it, then pivoting like mid pack or late pack 1, some speculative pick into black, like usually another chance. That was my classic pivot pick, like pick 11, another chance. I'm not hoping to play it, but I probably will play it, so I might as well pick it already. And then ended up with some kind of a dinosaur-based concoction, sometimes splashing Palani Hatcher if I was fortunate enough, and then putting reanimate package or something like that. And I enjoyed that, but later I couldn't get on the black for some reason, and I still couldn't get on the Jeskai, and it was like a mightily frustrating experience. This is nothing to, you know, do with the format. This has to do with the pods I was sitting in. Then like a lull of never opening any decent card for like I don't know how many drafts, and then having to play those decks that I knew I don't have bad cards in them, but I also don't have anything that brings quality. It's like C pluses across board, and these are frustrating decks because, you know, I couldn't end up on anything else because so many empty packs I've seen. It's like, you know, you pick the right lane. There's like 5 red cards, so clearly red was not being picked, but all of those red cards are just mediocre. And then you open the next one and there's like 4 cards that you want to pick, all of them in your color, but you only can pick one, and then 3 another empty packs. And I think that the disparity of the power level of the commons was something that was mighty frustrating for me. I couldn't get around it. It's just like I was either trying to get the very narrow path when I had one pick in every pack, but then ended up with those C pluses, or those disproportional things when I found an open lane and then pack 3, I just see dud after dud after dud because the wrong half of the set was opened in those particular boosters. Didn't like that part. And I think that we didn't have that in... I never had that problem in WoW. I never had that problem in LTR. I never had that problem in MUM. Phyrexia LB1 was a different format and a different experience altogether. But I also think that they didn't have that many empty packs as they had in LCI. And that's why I probably would give it like a 5 or something.
Yeah, I think that this set had a few cards too many that were very narrow or a very narrow purpose. Like, for example, I think it's like the epitome of it. Disruptor Wanderglyph, which is the 4-mana 3/4 artifact creature golem that when it attacks, you exile a card from an opponent's grave. Like, that's a card that nobody ever played. Just like if you put it in your deck, you had a train wreck, or maybe you cared about being an artifact and there's like a last resort. But when you read the designer's intentions, and this was on Twitter, they said, well, we wanted this here as kind of a safety valve for if the descend decks were too good. Number one, I'd argue this isn't the greatest way to do that. I think that if descend decks were too good, this isn't kind of the way that would fix that problem. But number two, too many safety valves for, oh, what if this deck is too good, means that if that safety valve misses, if it just has no place, you're going to end up with what you said, where it's just like, well, there's too many packs where there's not enough cards here that matter for me.
Like the Falter Discover card, never played that.
Exactly.
There was a bunch of those things. And, some of the cards even had like a fringe use, like the 5-mana regrowth that discovers 4. But you needed to be in the super right deck. If you were not in that deck, you just like see that later in the pack and it's like, okay, that's my green card for the pack. No, thank you.
Exactly.
Or worse, like you open the pack and there's like only green card is this thing. And you're like, oh.
Yes. You're like, oh, okay, I guess. Yeah. And, just one more observation I would have about my experience compared to your experience, and for the listeners out there, just like relating it to their experience, is often we think about formats as good or bad, right? Or like so varying levels of good or bad. And often people come into my chat and say like, hey, is this a good format? Should I draft it? Like, is it worth my time, basically? And, there's something that I will often give my opinion, what I think I've heard other people think, but there's always something in the back of my head that just says, you should just try it. You should just do it. Of course, I know not everybody has infinite time, infinite gems. That's always going to be a factor. But if those aren't a factor, you should try it, because what you're going to like as a Magic player and also your experience in the format will be pretty different than somebody else's, right? You might like, for example, I had somebody say to me, is Rivals of Ixalan a good format? I was listing all the things why I think I do like Rivals of Ixalan. But they were saying, oh, I'm really into like multicolored 5-color decks. I'm like, you're probably not going to get that here as much, right? And so even just like your own experiences in a format and what packs you tend to open, or the pods you're in, like you said earlier, that can influence how you view the format. So I guess my parting thought is that enjoyment of a format is not always going to be predicated on just like some objective measure. You and I have been joking about the word objective, how it gets overused a little bit in the Magic community, but it's not, there's not one objective measure that'll be like, yeah, this is a good format or not. There's a lot of things that go into it, including just your own personal experience.
Yeah, that's the word, preach. I actually tend to play the formats I don't like, and I lose more than the formats I win more in. It's a weird thing, but I just generally I just assume that if I'm losing in a format and I see people are winning, then I'm doing something wrong. So I might as well use it for experimentation. And this is I'm not going to learn by, oh, I'm winning in this, I'm learning. No, I'm not learning. I'm just doing what I already could do. If I burned so many gems on Theros Beyond Death, and I couldn't win in that format for the love of God.
Yep.
But this time, I mean, I was so desperate that I actually stopped playing LCI. I was not particularly keen on Khans of Tarkir. I didn't play that much.
Mm-hmm.
I started playing Standard, and I actually enjoy it because I think it closes some holes in my game, like patient playing, planning, figuring out plans. I think I realized at certain stage that I was so much stuck in the limited kind of improvisation jamming mode that I stopped making meta plans.
Yeah.
So I started playing Domain right now.
Nice.
And this deck requires you to make a big plan early and implement it, and especially when you play mirrors. That's like one big lesson of making the meta plan of the game.
Yep.
And I think it moves my game forward, and I'm actually enjoying it for the limited time I'm playing. So yeah, I found myself something else, and I'm eagerly awaiting Murders at the Karlov Manor.
Nice.
And definitely, I'm waiting very heavily on the Outlaws of the Thunder Junction or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
Because
I'm excited for
Dave
both
Humphreys.
of those.
Hey, Dave Humphreys. Set.
Exactly. Yep. If you didn't say it, I was going to say it. Limited players. If you do not know the good word of Dave Humphreys, every set that Dave Humphreys has been a lead design on has been a limited banger.
Like Avacyn Restored.
Well, maybe not everyone. I didn't want to mention that one, but yeah. No, it's funny.
When you look at the last 4 years, Ikoria, Kaldheim, Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, March of the Machine. Yeah. I rest my case.
Exactly.
It's going to be a banger.
Yeah, and unknowingly, well, you just talking about construct there. You actually kind of I'm getting ready to do a podcast with a guest about the things limited or constructed can teach limited players. So that's really I would agree with that. Constructed, we kind of joke in the limited community like, oh, gross constructed, but I do actually think it really helps. And if you're looking to do what Zergovich just said, kind of expand your range or think about games a little bit differently, I would really recommend it. And there's also decks that can just like train your skills that you do have in limited, or the things that you're tested in limited. I'm playing in standard right now, Boros Convoke, which is just a deck you're pretty familiar with in other formats, and it's a lot of fun. And it really does test like your combat math and finding lethal over multiple turns, and those are things that are very much rewarded in limited as well. So my personal opinion, I think I'm going to say this on my episode when I do talk about that. I think that meme should die. The limited players being like, ooh, constructed, because I think there's a lot of things to be gained from constructed as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Any further plugs?
No, I don't think so. I think we've said our parts. This was a ton of fun. I always will thank you and be very happy to join you at any time for anything.
Next time at your place.
Next time at my place. Exactly.
You just need to find a topic and give it to me, and I can spend a week digging in data, and we can combine your thoughts with what the data says. I would love that. Speed.
I would love that.
Come on, we can do it on speed.
Yeah, we can do it. We just need to put our minds to it. No, as always, thank you for having me on. It's been great. I thank you for diving into my data. I always find that interesting. And yeah.
So what, are we doing it for the next set?
Sure. I don't see why not.
Awesome.
It would be very hypocritical. I was just like, I don't know if I want to come back.
I need to have a chance to beat you next time.
Yeah.
It was closer than I thought, but I also had a very unfair advantage because I understood the system much better. Now you have sort of a level playing field.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great exercise in seeing where your evaluation skills are. Well, not perfect. And it's always hard. And, if you're going to miss on the whole color, that's understandable because you can't judge it. But maybe there's specific cards that we miss. And I think that, your amount of Fs given showed that you definitely are erring on the side of safety. And maybe that's something that you can lower.
Yeah, no, totally. I guess my final thought on this is I probably will, honestly, going into grading the next set, be a little more, because especially with, I know my audience, my community, they're not sure, you get a lot of people coming in that I think my content can help a very new player as well. But I think the community, the audience that limited level ups generally has, they can look at a card that I gave a D- and think, maybe that means it's not an F and there's somewhere that it could go. So I think I will give a few fewer S in the coming, in the coming set reviews.
And that's the last gift that you're going to bring us today.
Boom. But
okay, before we finish off, obviously it wouldn't be possible without 17 Lens. They provided the baseline, they provided the toolbox for everything that I'm doing as a content. So please be nice with them and support them. And also thanks to Fake Jake Brown, who is my friendly ghost behind the scenes to release the podcast version, coming soon to a headphone set nearby you. And thanks to Sesku and Mana Junkie, who are making the music of my podcast. And And yeah, with that, I'll see you next week. And I don't know what we're going to talk, probably about the previews already.
Sweet. All right. Peace out, everybody.